We begin today the Gemara on the Nun Beis Amud Beis and the Mishnah towards the bottom of the Amud. So the Mishnah, this is the last Mishnah actually discussing the description of the Daled Mises, and the last of the Daled Mises that it describes here is Chanika, when the person is choked, and that's the mitzvah of Misa. So the Mishnah, mitzvah sanechnokin. What's the fulfillment of the mitzvah of those that have to be nechnokin? He was submerged in manure up until his knees. And the point here is that he shouldn't move around, so that it shouldn't be hard that when he's going to be put to death, and then he's going to have to suffer extra. And then what they do is, you take a handkerchief or a scarf, which is tough and hard enough that it could do the job it has to do, but you place it and wrap it in a soft handkerchief, so it shouldn't injure him. And you wrap it around his neck, and then the two Eidim that testified against him, one on one side pulls in his direction, and the other pulls in the other direction, until he is choked, and that's the mitzvah of Misa. Says the Gemara, we learned in the Braise. So here it quotes a pasuk that is one of the cases where there's a chiyuv Misa of Chenek, and that's by this nusa of an Eishes Ish. Right, so you chayiv over there, the Ish, the Isha, they're chayiv Chenek, and based on this the Gemara will bring the source of Chenek. So the pasuk there says, Ish, the full pasuk over there actually says, Ish asher yinaf es Eishes Ish, asher yinaf es Eishes re'eyu mois yumas hanoyev hanayafes. Okay, so the Braise begins and it explains all the words of this pasuk. Ish means prat lekotten. A man means that who's chayiv misa only if it's a man, excluding a cotton. When it says asher yinaf es Eishes Ish, he had a relation with an Eishes Ish. Who's Eishes Ish? Prat leishes cotton. If she's married to a cotton, so then she's not an Eishes Ish. And the reason is because by a cotton, there's no kiddushin. And you see it from here, because it says Eishes Ish. And then it says Eishes Re'eyu, that this was a wife of your friend. What does it mean? Prat leishes acherim. That means that if she was married to a Yid, then the kiddushin takes effect. She's an Eishes Ish. But if she's married to a acherim, which means, Rashi says a kuti, but it means really a goy. If she's married to a goy, by a goy there is no kiddushin. And therefore she's not an Eishes Ish. Then the pasuk concludes, Mois Yumas, that the punishment for this is Mois Yumas, which is Bechenek, the Misa of Chenek. Now here, the Braise will focus on the main point to explain, how do we know that it's Chenek? You say that the Misa here is Chenek, maybe it's one of the other Misas that the Torah says. So the answer the Braise says to this is, Amarta, you say, Kol Mokim Shenema, Misa B'Torah Stam. Anytime the Torah says Misa in the Torah, and it doesn't specify what Misa it is, you're not allowed to assume that it's a more stringent Misa, which are, where the skilas reifa hereg, that are on a higher level than Chenek. It has to be the most lenient one. And therefore, here it's going to be Chenek. Divrei Rabbi Yeshia, this is Rabbi Yeshia's opinion. Okay, now what's still lacking over here in the explanation of what Rabbi Yeshia says is, how do we b'chlal know that there is such a Misa in the Torah called Chenek? All the other misas in the Torah, it says clearly in the Torah, in some case, that there's a misa of skila, or sreifa, or hereg, with a cherev, that is, but it never says in the Torah the misa in the oifen of chenek. Where does Rabbi Yeshia take this from? That he's saying that this is lahakal aleh. So we'll see soon in the Gemara. It's halach l'moshe misinai. Rabbi Yonasan says, loy mipnei shi kalo. No, the reason why when it says a mois yumas by the Eishes Ish is not because this is the lightest of all misas. Ella rather, the source is as follows. Kol misa ha'amura b'Torah stam eina ela chenek. When the Torah says the term misa in the Torah means chenek. And here the Braise continues and explains right away, how do we know this? Rabbi Yaimes, or Rabbi explained, Rabbi Yonasan's opinion, the reason we know this is because Nema Misa B'dei Shamayim. It says in the Torah the term Misa that the Eibusher brings death on a person. It's in the beginning of the Torah. Rashi brings Vayamas Gam Oisei, and V'nema Misa B'dei Adam. And it says in the Torah here Mois Yumas B'dei Adam, that the Bezdin gives Misa. So I compared the two. Ma Misa Amur B'dei Shamayim Misa Shem Bareishim. Just like when the Eibusher brings death on a person, so the body remains as is intact, and the Misa is that the Eibusher takes out his neshama. Af misa murid midei adam. So to the misa that it says here by the chiyuv misa of mois yumas she'ein bareishim. It means the kind of misa where the person's body remains as is, and that's by the misa of chenek. By the misa of cherev, so then over there the person's body is not as is, and by skila also not. But by chenek, the body of the person remains as is, and therefore we know that there's such a kind of misa called chenek. But the Gemara asks on this, ve'eim sreifa. But if that's the point, that the person's body remains similar to when there's a misa b'dei shamayim, so maybe it's sreifa. As we learned before, what's the misa of sreifa? That you pour the melted lead down the person's throat that only burns inside, but otherwise the person's body remains intact. Says the Gemara, but it can't be sreifa because since the Torah says that by an Eishes and she's a bas koyin, that over there's a unique chiddush that her misa is sreifa, the cloud the whole lav bas sreifi. So here when it says by an Eishes that mois yumas naiv and ayafes, that the woman is put to death, it can't be sreifa because then it would be the same as bas koyin. So therefore it must be something different. And what is that? A misa of chenek, which is similar to a misa b'dei shamayim where the body remains. That's the source according to Rabbi Yonasan, as Rebbe explains it in the Braisa. So now the Gemara will explain Rabbi Yeshia's opinion, the first opinion of the Braisa. Says the Gemara, Bishleim le Rabbi Yonasan kedikam mefarish taime, Rebbe taime that is. According to Rabbi Yonasan, we understand what's the source that there's such a kind of misa of chenek, as Rebbe explains it. But Elul Rabbi Yeshia, but according to Rabbi Yeshia, mimai the ikke chenek ba'ilam. What's the source b'chlal that there is such a kind of misa of chenek? He says that because it doesn't specify in the Torah what misa it is, so you can't be stringent. We'll assume that it's the lightest of the four, which is chenek. But he didn't even bring a source b'chlal that there is such a misa of chenek. Says the Gemara, this is the continuation of the question. Ein Messiah, I would say that the lightest, maybe there's only 3 misas, and maybe the Saif is the lightest of them all. Answers the Gemara, so Rava says, no, Arba misas, the fact that there are 4, Gemara, Gemiri Lahu. That's a halacha l'Moshe Misinai, that there's the 4 misas with their names, Skilas, Reifa, Hereg, and Chenek. But now, it's not specified here in this Mais Yumas, which one it is. So therefore, we say that from those 4, this one is the lightest of all of them, so therefore we have to be Mekel and give the lightest, which is Chenek. But the source of Chenek is a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. Okay, now the Gemara explains another detail here in the machlokes between Rabbi Yonasan and Rabbi Yeshia. When Rabbi Yonasan argues on Rabbi Yeshia, he says, before he explains his opinion, he says, don't say that Mois Yumas means Chenek because it's the lightest of them all. Why is he saying that? Says the Gemara, Kamiflagi beplukte the Rab Shimon v'Rabbanan. Rabbi Yonasan and Rabbi Yeshia here are arguing in the same machlokes we had before between Rab Shimon and Rabbanan. When Rabbi Yeshia says that Chenek is the lightest, he's following the opinion of Rabbanan that say that Chenek is at the bottom. But when Rabbi Yonasan says, no, it's not the lightest, it's because he's following Rab Shimon's opinion that says that Hereg with the Saif is the lightest, and the Chenek is one up, and therefore that can't be the source for why it's Chenek, and therefore he brings a source, like Rabbi says, a different source for the Misa of Chenek. Okay, the Gemara starts a new inyan, which will relate back to the point that we mentioned before. Amalei Rab Zeire says to Abaye. Now, this is based on the Mishnah that there is here later in the Pedic, that there are certain Avedas in the Torah where the Torah clearly specifies that the Misa has to be skila. Right? And that's Avedah Zara, Naira Mayrasa, by a girl that's after the first stage of marriage, and she's Mizana, Chilul Shabbos, and then Oivi Yudaini, which are kinds of Kishift, which we'll see the details about this later, and Megadif, the one that the opposite of blesses Hashem's name. Those are the Misas that it says clearly in the Torah that they're Misa are skila. Now, the question though is, Shar an Eskolin, all the other cases that the Mishnah lists, that they are also Chayiv skila, the Leiksiv skila, and it does not say skila specifically clearly in the Torah. Now, from where do we know that by those other cases that the Misa there is skila as well? So the answer is the Gomri Ma'oivi Yudaini. It's because we learn it out from the Misa that it says by Oivi Yudaini. So we compare, just like by Oiv and Yudaini, the Torah clearly says that the Misa is skila, so we learn out that the other cases that the Mishnah counts that are Chayiv skila are compared to there. So now there's Shaila. Rab Zeira asked Abaye, which will be relevant to what we said before, B'mai Gomri. How exactly is the limud? From what word by Oiv Yudaini are we comparing to the other Niskolin? B'mais Yumasu Gomri? Is it because by Oiv and Yudaini it says the term Mais Yumasu? Or or is it because we learn it from what it says by Oivi Yudaini, the term Dmei and Bam, their blood is in them. The actual pasuk that it says by Oivi Yudaini is Isha Yisha Ki Yibem Oiva Yudaini Moisiu Masu. That's what it says first, and then it says Be'evan Yirgamu Oisam. So it's clearly saying that it's skila, and then it says Dmei and Bam. So when we compare the other cases that are also chayiv skila, even though the Torah did not specify, from which languages are we learning it out? From the term ma'is yumasu or from the term d'meim bam? That's what Abzeda asks Abaye. Amalei, so Abaye answers, b'dmeim, d'meim, bam, gomri. We learn it out from the term d'meim that it says here by Oivin Yedaini to other cases in the Torah where it also uses the term d'meim, so we know that it has to be skila. Now, then he explains the ib, mois yumasu gomri, because if you're going to say that we learn it out from what it says here, mois yumasu, we compare it to other cases where it also says mois yumasu, so then d'meim, lamali. So then the extra words of d'meim, what are we going to learn out from there? So what the Gemara says, well, if that's what you're arguing, so then say the exact opposite also. Elamai b'dmeim d'meim gomri. We learn it out from the extra words d'meim. We compare the d'meim here to the d'meim in other places. So moisi masu lamali. So then the question becomes, what do I learn from this that it says moisi masu? If I'm not comparing to what it says in other places, so when it says here by Oivin Yedaini moisi masu, it's extra. It already says be'evin yirgemu d'meim bam. Why does it have to say moisi masu? Says the Gemara, that's not a question. The Tanya, because the answer to that is the words mois yumasu is coming to teach us what we learned in the Braisa, and it's brought already earlier in the Masechta. It says mois yumas hamakeretzeyach. When it uses this double term, mois yumas, and it says that he's a ritzeyach. Why does he use this kind of term? Because it's teaching me as follows. I would think that the only way he could be put to death, this murderer, is the misa that Torah specifies by him. How do you know if this person is running away and you can't kill him the way the Torah says that it should be put to death? So then you can give him any misa in any way. So therefore it says the double lashon of mois yumas to say mikol moken. However it is to give him the chiyuv misa, you can put this person to death, this reitzeyach. That's what you learn out from the double lashon of mois yumasu, and therefore mois yumasu is not extra. Whenever it says in the Torah mois yumasu, we know this halacha that you can put him to death in any way. But from d'meim bam, we learn out something else. Wherever it says in the Torah the expression of d'meim bam, we learn from there that the misa is skila. Now Taisus here points out that this concept that if you can't give him the misa that the Torah prescribes to him, so then you can give him any misa, where it says mois yumasu, that means any misa, which means not even similar to any of the four ways that the Torah says, skila, sreifa, herek, and chenek. But there, in other places where it does not say mois yumasu, you could also give him a misa not only in the way that the Torah says, but it only has to be from one of these four, not in any other way. That's Taisus' opinion. The Rambam disagrees. The Rambam says by all misas, it can be in any misa. Okay, so this is the conversation. In any way. This is the conversation that the Gemara is bringing here between Rab Zera and Abaye. The source for all those other places where it doesn't say clearly skila, we learn it out from the term d'meim bam and not from the term mois yumasu. So now here the Gemara will explain what's really behind this conversation. Amalei Ravacha medifti l'Ravina. Ravacha from Difti asks Ravina, what was Rab Zera wondering about? Whether you learn it out from mois yumasu or d'meim bam, what difference does it make? Viba mois yumasu gamri. If Abaye were to answer him that we don't learn it out from d'meim bam, you learn out from mois yumasu. Maika kashile. What question would he add? What would he have on this? In other words, if Rab Zera was inquiring by Abaye whether the source is d'meim bam or the source was mois yumasu, it's because he had some question here. Now that he told him you learn out from d'meim bam, he doesn't have a question. But if you would have learned it out from mois yumasu, there's some question that he had. What is that question? Says the Gemara, if you're going to say that his question was as follows, that this is going to create a problem with other places that the misa is not skila. If the limud is from mois yumasu, then there are other places where it says mois yumasu, and the chiyuv should be skila there. So if you're going to say the problem is eishesish, what we just spoke about before regarding the eishes ish kakashile, that's his question. Lemeisi lemigmar mois yumas moivi yadaini. What did we say before? What's the chiyuv misa of eishes ish? Chanek. But the question is, if you're going to say that you're learning out from mois yumasu that it says by oivin yadaini that it's skila, so why is eishes ish chanek? We should learn out from oivin yadaini that ma'ala alom b'skila, just like there it's skila, afkam b'skila, so too by the eishes ish it's skila. That's what you should learn. That would be the question of Rab Zera if you're learning out from the term mois yumasu. And what the Gemara says, that's not a question. Why not? What does the Torah say? She's also an Eshes Ish, but she's only after the first stage of marriage, and that's a Aveda that's actually worse. And over there, the Torah says by the Naira Meirasa, there's a Chumrah that she's Chayiv Skila. So Maklal, from this I understand, in Nesua, that if she's a full Eshes Ish, Lav B'Skila. That over there, when it says Moisi Masu, it's not Skila. So there's no question. The fact that if we were to learn out that all other places where it says in the Torah Moisi Masu that it means Skila, you can't ask why by Eshes Ish it's not Skila, because over there it's clear that the Torah is making a distinction between the Arusa and the Nesua. So Ella, rather, what would have been the question of Rab Zeire? The question is, in a case where a person hits his father and his mother, and over there also, what's the misa that he gets for this? Chenek. So the question is, since there it uses the term mais yumas, why not compare it to Oven Yedaini? That over there it says that the chiyuv is skila. But on this the Gemara says, but that's not going to be a question either. Because the Gomri Moiv Yedaini, you're learning out from Oven Yedaini to say that the chiyuv is skila. Ligmuru me'eshes ish. Why not learn out from eshes ish? You have now two options. Either you can learn out from the mais yumasa by Oven Yedaini that's skila, or you can learn out from the mais yumasa that it says by eshes ish, which is chenek. And if you have these two options, you can't learn out from Oven Yedaini for the more stringent misa, which is skila. You have to learn out the lighter misa, which is only chenek. So that's not a question either. So why was Rab Zeire inquiring by Abaye whether we're learning it out from Tumei and Bam or we're learning it out from mais yumasa? Amalei. So Ravina explained, Shar an Eskolin Gufayu Kokashile. He has a question from all the other Eskolin that the Mishnah says that you're going to be chayiv over there, skila, and not chenek. His question is on this. How do you know by all these other cases in the Torah where it says that you chayiv skila, and it doesn't specify in the Torah skila? I'm only learning it out from Oven Yedaini, but the question is going to be on that itself. The gamri, because if you say that you learn them out from the term of Moisi Masu that it says by Oven Yedaini, so then I'll add to you, the gamri Moivi Yedaini. Why are you learning it out from Oven Yedaini? To be more stringent, to give him the most harshest misa, which is skila, ligmuru me'eshes ish. As we just said, you always have to go to the lighter one if you have an option, and you should learn it out from eshes ish, and it should be only chenek. So therefore, Abaye said, no, we're not learning it out from Moisi Masu. We're learning it out from Tumei and Bam. The Me'im Bam does not say anywhere else. It says it by these places, and it says by Oven Yedaini. So therefore, we know that we learn it out from Oven Yedaini that they're chayiv skila. Zok Mishnah, after the Mishnah is finished explaining all the four misas, now it starts listing the categories of the different averis, who's chayiv skila and who's chayiv in the other misas. Eilu heinan eskolin. These are the ones that their misa is skila. A person that has a relation with his mother, Valesha Sa'av, or with his father's wife, even if it's not his mother, Valakala, or a daughter-in-law, Valaschor, on another male, Valabehema, or relation with an animal, Valaisha Mevia Esa Behema, or a woman that brings an animal on her and has a relation with an animal, Valamegadif, and one that's Megadif the Eibishter, the opposite of blessing Hashem's name. One that serves Avodah Zarah, one that gives over his child for Melech, which is the chukas right. It's not necessarily avodah zarah, but it's the way the goyim do this with a child. And also Oven Yedaini, which will be explained later in the Masechta here, what exactly Oven Yedaini means. V'amachal Shabbos, one that desecrates Shabbos. V'amakal lov v'imay, one that curses a father and a mother. Over here, the Torah is actually more machmer than one that hits a father and mother. There it's chayiv chenek, and here it's actually skila because he embarrasses his father and mother and so on. And he's also cursing its means with the Eibish's name. So he said the Eibish's name in vain. Va'abal naira meirasa, person that has a relation with the naira after the first stage of marriage. Va'amesis, one that convinces others to serve avodah zarah, individuals. Va'amediach, one that persuades a whole city to serve avodah zarah. Va'amachashiv, a sorcerer. Ben Seirer Umayre, and then the Ben Seirer Umayre, which will be explained also later in the Masechta regarding a child that is very wild, and he also is chayiv skila. Okay, now the Mishnah explains Haba le'eim, one that has a relation with his mother. So, and this is also his father's wife. So chayiv aleh mishumeim u'mishumei shesav. So he's actually chayiv twice. Once for the fact that it's his mother, and once for the fact that it's his father's wife. If it's both his mother and his father's wife. And obviously the relevance of this is not for Misa, because regarding Misa, you could only give a person Misa once. But the fact that he's chayiv twice is relevant in a case where he did this b'sheigig, and then he'll have to bring 2 karbanis chatas. And based on the continuation of the Mishnah, he could actually be chayiv 3. If she's still an Eishes Ish, she's still married to her father, so then she's chayiv, he that is the boil would be chayiv for the fact that it's his mother, the fact that it's Eishes Av, and the fact that she's an Eishes Ish. But here it only says 2, because if the father's not alive anymore, then it'll only be these 2, the mother and Eishes Av. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. He says, even though this is also your father's wife, but in this case where it's his mother and his father's wife, he'll be chayiv only for it being his mother. Now, Habal Eishes Av, one that has a relation with his father's wife, it's not his mother. Chayiv mishum Eishes Av u'mishum Eishes Ish. If she's still married to his father, so then there's 2, Eishes Av, and also the fact that she's an Eishes Ish. Now, Bein b'chayi yoviv, bein la'acha misas oviv. The Isser of Eishes Av applies if the father's still alive, and even after the father passed away. But if this was your father's wife, the Isser of Eishes Av still applies, and that's Bein Menedis and Bein Menesuah. Whether the father was not fully married to her or fully married to her, doesn't make a difference. It's the same Isser of Eishes Av. Obviously, if the father's not alive anymore, the Isser of Eishes Ish does not apply. But the Isser of Eishes Av applies whether he's still married to her or not. Another case, says the Mishnah, regarding what we said before, Habal Kalosoi, one that has a relation with his daughter-in-law, Chayev Aleh Mishum Kalosoi. Over here also there's 2. One is it's his daughter-in-law, and also Mishum Eishes Ish. She's married to his son, so she's an Eishes Ish. Now, the Isser of the daughter-in-law is Bein B'chayi B'noi, Bein La'acha Misas B'noi. Whether his son is still alive, whether his son passed away. And that's Bein Menedis and Bein Menasum, whether after the first stage of marriage or the second stage of marriage, the Isser of Kalos still applies. But obviously, if his son is not alive anymore, she's not married to him, then the Isser of Eishes Ish will not apply anymore. Okay, so the Gemara will explain here Rabbi Yehuda's opinion in the Mishnah and the source of Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. But first, the Gemara brings a Braise that records the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda is slightly different than what it said in the Mishnah. It says the Gemara Tanya and Braise we learned Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Yehuda says, in a case where this is your mother and it's also your father's wife, but this is a mother that's married to your father that she wasn't allowed to be married to him, then in this case he'll only be chayiv if he has a relation with her for the fact that it's his mother, and not for the fact that it's his father's wife, because she wasn't allowed to be married to him. Now this is different than our Mishnah, because in our Mishnah it said that in any case that a person has a relation with his mother and it's his father's wife, he's only chayiv for the fact that it's his mother and not his father's wife. But here, first the Gemara explains the pshat of Rabbi Yehuda in the Braise. What is this case Rabbi Yehuda is talking about? What does he mean to say that if it's a mother that's not supposed to be married to his father, then he's not chayiv for Eishes Av? What is that case of Ein Royuloi? If you're going to say the case here is Chayve Krisis v'Chayve Mrs. Bezdin. She's married to her father, even though there's an Issa Kodesh or an Issa of Mrs. Bezdin that she's not allowed to be married to him. And it's in that case that Rabbi Yehuda said that she's not going to be Chayiv, you're not going to be Chayiv if you have a relation with the mother for Eishes Av. Says the Gemara, well, the reason why Rabbi Yehuda is saying this in such a case is very simple. Because if she's not allowed to be married to him, because it's an Issa Kodesh or Issa Mrs. Bezdin, then the Kiddushin with his father never took effect. It's not Eishes Av really. Because by Kodesh and Mrs. Bezdin, Kiddushin does not take effect. So says the Gemara, but if that's the pshat in Rabbi Yehuda, now Rabbi Yehuda is arguing on the Rabbanon. So how are we to understand the opinion of the Rabbanon? Meklal, should I learn out from this? The Rabbanon Savri, the Rabbanon's opinion is Afagav de Ein Ru'uyuloi, that even in such a case where the mother is married to his father, and it's a Kodesh, it's a Mrs. Bezdin, they can't be married at all. So still the Rabbanon would say that Afagav de Ein Ru'uyuloi, that even in this case, the person would be chayiv misa for the mother being Eishes Av. It's not the wife of the father. The Kiddushin didn't take effect at all. There's no Kiddushin that takes effect in a case where the woman that you're marrying is a Kodesh or Mrs. Bezdin. So that can't be the argument. The Rabbanah would agree to this. Ella says the Gemara, the pshat here is Chayve Lavin. It must be that the mother is married to the father in a case where there's an Isser of a Lav, not the Chiyav of Kodesh, but an Isser of a Lav. So even though it's not allowed, but by a Lav, according to most opinions, the Kedushin takes effect, even though it's an Isser. So it's in this case that Rabbi Yehuda is saying that nevertheless, you're only going to be chayav for the fact that it's your mother and not for Eishesav. And the Gemara explains why. But Rabbi Yehuda, Savalak Rabbi Akiva, because it's Rabbi Yehuda is following the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, and his opinion was unique. What did Rabbi Akiva say? The Amar Rabbi Akiva says, Ein Kedushin Toivsim B'chayve Lavin. That Kedushin does not take effect, not only not by a Isser of Kodesh or Mrs. Bezin, but even by Chayve Lavin, Kedushin does not take effect. So therefore, if it's his mother that's married to his father, but it's an Isser of a Lav, a Chi of Lav, it's not married, there's no marriage to the father here, because the marriage never took effect according to Rabbi Akiva. This is Rabbi Akiva that's brought in many places. It's brought in the Gemara in Yevamis. There the Gemara brings a source for this. Okay, so now what that would mean is that the machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan is this point. Do we hold like Rabbi Akiva? Now the Rabbanan say that by Chi of Lav, the Kedushin did take effect, and therefore you'll be chayav for Eishes Av. It is your father's wife. But the Gemara asks on this. We see in another place that Rabbi Yehuda holds, seemingly not like Rabbi Akiva. Also, Rav Aishia asks from what it says by the mitzvah of Yibum. So the mitzvah of Yibum, if a person dies without children, so the brother has to marry his wife, but there's exceptions to this. There's certain cases where the mitzvah of Yibum does not apply. If for this brother it's going to be a Issa Kodesh to marry his brother's wife, then the mitzvah of Yibum does not apply. But over here, this Braise or this Mishnah from Yevamis says that there are cases where really there should be a mitzvah of Yibum, but nevertheless Chachamim said you should not fulfill the Yibum. You should only do Chalitza instead. What is that? Isser mitzvah. If there's an Isser which is a mitzvah, and the Gemara will explain in a moment what that is, or the Isser Kedusha, or Isser of a Kedusha, which will be explained, Chaletzes v'loy misyabemes. So in this case, you do Chalitza and you don't do Yibum. Now, what are these two things? Says the Gemara, Isla mitzvah means Shniyais Medivrei Seifrim. If the brother that has to now do Yibum for his brother's wife, but if there's a Isla Midrabanan for him to marry his brother's wife, so then Chachamim said that you should not do the mitzvah of Yibum. Now, V'amai Karelo Isla mitzvah. What is this expression of a Isla Midrabanan? Why is it referred to as a Isla mitzvah? Because Shem mitzvah l'shmai Divrei Chachamim. Chachamim instituted this Isla, and it's a mitzvah to follow what the Chachamim said. That's the meaning of this expression. Now, what's the Issa Kedusha that it's talking about? When it's saying here that there's an Issa of a Kedusha that the brother should not marry his brother's wife, should not do Yibum, that's an Almana l'Kohen Gadol. It could either be an Almana that cannot marry a Kohen Gadol, or Grusha v'Chalutza l'Kohen Hedyot, if she's a Grusha Chalutza from a previous marriage, and the brother is either a Kohen Gadol or a Kohen Hedyot, and both of these cases are Issa of Kedusha, and this is the Issa which is only a Lav. There's no Kodesh in this, but nevertheless, this is a special Kedusha of the Kayin, because over there in the Pasuk, when it says the Issa by the Kayinim, it says that it's because of their Kedusha, the Chsiv, Kedoshim Yeh Lekayim, so therefore you're not allowed to do the Yibum here. Now she explains that the reason why you don't do Yibum here, really Menatayre, there should be a mitzvah of Yibum here, even in this case. Obviously, if there's only Issa Midrabanan for the brother to marry his brother's wife, the mitzvah of Yibum Menatayre should apply. It's deichid Issa Midrabanan, and even if it's a Isser of Lav, still the mitzvah of Yibum should apply as well, because the klal always is Esse deicheleis Esse. So really, the mitzvah of Yibum should apply. But Chachamim were guys that you should not do Yibum here, and the reason is because the mitzvah of Yibum is only the first bia, the first relation. After that, you're not allowed anymore. The Isser comes back. So in order for them not to be nichshal, to have a relation again, Chachamim said you should not do the Yibum at all in this case. That's the pshat. Okay, now here comes Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda agrees to this as well, it seems, because V'tani Allah, on this we learned in Abraise, Rabbi Yehuda machlev chalufi. Rabbi Yehuda agrees to what it says here in this Mishnah, but he just switches the meaning of the terms, the meaning of Isser Mitzvah and Isser Kedusha. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, Isser Mitzvah means the Isser that we said by a Kohen, because by the Kohen, in the end of that parsha, where it says about the Isser of the Almana to the Kohen Gadol, it says Eila HaMitzvahs. So Isser Mitzvah refers to the Isser of the Kohen Gadol, which is the Isser of Lav. And when it says Issa Kedusha, that refers to the Issa Midrabanan, where the Chachamim added extra Kedusha, Kadesh Atzmucha B'mutalach, to stay far from an Averim and Atayra. But otherwise, Rabbi Yehuda agrees to what it says here in this mission. That's what it seems. Says the Gemara, again, where am I over here? Oh, Tani Allah Rabbi Yehuda Machlef Chalufi. Okay, says the Gemara, or Rabbi Yehuda Machlef rather, that's how you read it. Rabbi Yehuda switches this. Now, Chalufi, Huda Machlef. He's only switching the understanding of the terms. Issa Mitzvah and Issa Kedusha. Hachalitza Baye. But according to Rabbi Yehuda, in such a case, where there's an Issa of a Lav, still, there's a Mitzvah of chalitza that applies over here. And the reason is because really, minatayre, the mitzvah of yibum and the mitzvah of chalitza still applies. But the question on this is, what did we say before? Rabbi Yehuda agrees to Rabbi Akiva. And what does Rabbi Akiva hold? Isser of a lav and the Isser of Kodesh is the same. If so, if Rabbi Yehuda holds that like Rabbi Akiva, so mechdi, let's see. Chayav elav and Rabbi Akiva k'chayve krisis dami. We compare chayve elav and chayve krisis. The chayve krisis, what's the halacha by chayve krisis? Lav b'nei chalitza v'yibum nino. In a case where for the brother to marry his brother's wife, there's an Isser of Kodesh, there's no mitzvah of Yibum in the first place. There's no Yibum, there's no Chalitza, there's nothing. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, if we're saying that Rabbi Yehuda holds like Rabbi Akiva, so we should say the same thing regarding a case where there's an Isser of Alav, that there's no Chalitza because there's no mitzvah of Yibum in the first place here. So here in this Mishnah, or in this Braise, where Rabbi Yehuda is quoted, it seems to be clear that Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with Rabbi Akiva. Okay, Tosfos here points out that what the Gemara says here is not so pashut because we're comparing. Rabbi Akiva only said we compare a lav to Kodesh regarding one sense, that the kedushin does not take effect. That if you marry someone that there's an Issa lav, it's not your wife at all. Who says we compare regabi this point over here that there's no mitzvah of yibum and chalitza? Tosfos doesn't give an explanation, but there's a chiddush in what it says here in the Gemara. So the Gemara says, you're right, that if this is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, then he must be arguing with Rabbi Akiva, but that's not what Rabbi Yehuda holds. Says the Gemara, Lidvara of the Tanakama Kamara, V'leilei Svirelei. Rabbi Yehuda was just commenting on the opinion of the Tanakama to explain the meaning of the terms over here. It's a mitzvah or it's a kedusha, but really Rabbi Yehuda himself doesn't hold of all of this. Rabbi Yehuda holds in a case where it's a Isser Lav, it's similar to Isser Kodesh, and there is no mitzvah of Yibum and Chalitza in the first place. Okay, now the Gemara comes back to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda itself that we're discussing. What are we discussing over here? A person that has a relation with his mother, and it's also his father's wife. Will he be chayiv twice or not? So in the Braisa we quoted that Rabbi Yehuda said, in a case where ein re'uya that she wasn't supposed to be married to his father, there won't be the Isser of Eishes of. But here the Gemara brings the way Rabbi Yehuda was said in the Mishnah. It says the Gemara Kiyasar Rav Yitzchak Tani Keditnan. He brought the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda like it said in the Mishnah, and that is Rabbi Yehuda Aimer. Rabbi Yehuda says that in any case, when a person has a relation with his mother, which is also his father's wife, he's only chayiv once for the fact that it's his mother, and not for the fact that it's his father's wife. Now, what's the reason for this? So the Gemara brings Abaya first. So the Gemara is going to try a few different ways here. First, the Gemara says, Amar Abaya said, because the Amakra, in the Pasuk, where it says this Isser of one not to have a relation with his mother, so the full Pasuk that it says there is, Ervas Avicha, Ve'ervas Imcha Loisegale, Imcha, and then the pasuk says again, Imcha hi, this is your mother. It already said, Ervas Imcha Loisegale, and it adds, Imcha hi, it's your mother. Loisegale Arvasa. So Abai says, this is what Rabbi Yehuda is arshing, these extra words. When it says Imcha hi, so what it's saying is, Mishum imay atamachayvai. If it's his mother and his father's wife, the chiyuv will only be the fact that it's his mother. In such a case, he's not going to be chayiv for the fact that it's his father's wife. Says the Gemara, if those words imcha hi are extra, and therefore you darshan this, so if so, there's another pasuk which it says actually right afterwards in the Torah. What does it say in this pasuk? Ervas eishes avicha loisegale. Your father's wife, you should not be megale at the issa of erva here, and then it concludes ervas avicha hi. Also extra words. Why does it say ervas avicha hi? So you should learn from here the same thing. Mishum eishes avat mechayvoi, that in a case where it's your mother and it's your father's wife, so you could only be chayiv for the fact that it's your father's wife. Viat mechayvoi mishum imoy, but he's not going to be chayiv for the fact that it's his mother. So if so the Gemara asks, it comes out. Ella imay shehi eishes aviv. If he has a relation with his mother, which is also his father's wife, so then is he going to be chayiv for anything? L'chayre comes out now that if you're going to say the miyut from imchahi and you're going to say the miyut from eishes aviv, so now koi hacha umemayit la, koi hacha umemayit la. So if you want to be mechayiv him for the fact that it's his mother, well, we have a miyut that says eishes av, that he's only chayiv for eishes av and not chayiv for the fact that it's his mother. If you want to be mechayiv him for the fact that it's his eishes av, it says that he's only chayiv for the fact that it's his mother, not for eishes av. So it comes out that we are excluding that he's not chayiv for neither. So then what's going on over here? You can't say this kind of miyut because then it comes out he's not going to be chayiv for anything. It's a contradiction. So the Gemara says it's going to come out as follows: Hashta imoy she'ena eishes aviv. If this is his mother and it's his mother which is not his father's wife. So what's going to be the halacha? Mechayiv, in such a case, he will be chayiv. If it's only his mother, and she's not his father's wife anymore, so then he's going to be chayiv. Or if it's a case of eishes aviv, if it is his father's wife, but this is not his mother, mechayiv, then you are going to be chayiv. Right? In other words, what the Gemara is saying is, in order to explain that these two drushes that we're learning out here should not be a contradiction, the only way to explain this, you're going to have to say that if it's only his mother, then he's going to be chayiv. If it's only his father's wife, then he's going to be chayiv. However, if it's imoy shehi eishes aviv, but if this is his mother and it's also she's still married to his father, it's also his father's wife, then in such a case loy mechayev klal. Then the two drushes here are saying if it's both together, your mother and your father's wife, then we have these two drushes that are memayit that now you're not going to be chayiv. Not for the fact that it's your mother, not for the fact that it's your father's wife. You're only going to be chayiv in a case where it's either only your mother or only your father's wife. So that doesn't make any sense. Why would we say that if a person has a relation with this woman that is both his mother and his father's wife, then he's going to be totally pater. But if he has a relation with this woman which is either only his mother or only his father's wife, then he's going to be chayiv. How does that make sense? So therefore, the Gemara is proving that you can't say that you darshan the extra words in the pasuk of imchahi, because then you'll have to darshan similar avichahi, and it comes out that the drasha is very strange. So another question on the way Abaya darshan this, the Rabbana Nami, according to the Rabbana's opinion, haksiv imchahi. It says here this miyut in the pasuk imchahi. So why do the Rabbana not darshan this? The Rabbanan say that you're always going to be chayiv twice, one for the mother and one for being the father's wife. But what do they do with this miyut of imchahi? Ella, so therefore the Gemara says, this drasha, these extra words of imchi, does not relate to what we're talking about here. It is extra words, but it's darshan for something else. What's darshan of this is what Rav Shesha Baridi learns out, which we'll see in the next blot here and Daf Nun Dal. The Gemara explains what you learn out from there. So therefore, the Rabbi Yehuda Nami, just like according to the Chachamim, that's a drasha for something else. Something else is learned out from there. So the question is, what is the source of Rabbi Yehuda's opinion? When a person has a relation with his mother, which is also his father's wife, how do we know that he's only going to be chayiv for the fact that it's his mother and not for the fact that it's his father's wife? So the Gemara brings a second source. Elam Ravacha says, on Makra, you look into the same pasuk, there's another source. It says, Ervasa. It says there in the pasuk, Lo Segale Ervasa. Only her erva. What is it coming to say? Mishum erva achas atam b'chayva. It uses a singular term. This erva of the fact that it's your mother. That's what you're chayiv for. V'yatam b'chayv mishum shtei ervas. But you're not chayiv a second time for the fact that it's also the erva of the father's wife. That's the limud. But the Gemara asks on this: if you're medayik this term, the singular term of ervasa, so now you could say a similar thing regarding a person that has a relation with his daughter-in-law. So it says in the pasuk, "Ervas kalascha loisegale eishes bin chahi," and then the pasuk concludes, "Loisegale ervasa." Also using this term, the same singular term of loisegale ervasa. So hachanami, are you going to darshan here as well and say mishum erva achas atam mechayvoi, that you're only going to be chayv once when a person has a relation with his daughter-in-law? V'yatam mechayv mishum shtei ervas, and you're not going to be chayv a second time. Now that can't be, because vatnan in our Mishnah it said habal kalosai, a person that has a relation with his daughter-in-law chayv aleh mishum kalosai, he's chayv twice, once for his daughter-in-law, or mishum eishes ish, and he's also chayv for the fact that it's an eishes ish. And the Mishnah said, "Bein b'chayiv b'noi, bein la'achamisas b'noi." He'll be chayiv for the fact that it's in daughter-in-law, whether his son is still alive or not. Now over here, in this case, v'loi polig Rabbi Yehuda. Here, Rabbi Yehuda does not argue in this. If the source of Rabbi Yehuda, why he says in the case by a mother, which is also Eishes Av, he argues and says he's only going to be chayiv once, is because of the term ervasa. Rabbi Yehuda should have argued here as well. He should have said it the same applies by a daughter-in-law, where the Torah uses the exact same term as ervasa. So Ella says the Gemara, this term of Lo Segale Ervasa is not a drasha. You can't say that it's only, not necessarily doesn't mean that you only chayiv once. And the reason is, Kivin the Chad Gufuhu, since we're talking about one person. True, you chayiv twice, but it's one person. So afagav the trei yisurin, even if there are two yisurim that you over, ksiv ervasa, the Torah writes ervasa because it's one person. So hachanami here as well, when it comes to the term of ervasa that it says by a mother, which also is the father's wife, even the chad gufu, since it's all one body, afagav the trei yisurin in ksiv ervasa. The Torah says the term ervasa, so there's no raya from here that you're only going to be chayiv once. So therefore the Gemara concludes, and this is the maskan of the Gemara, Ella Amar Rave, so Rave says, this is going back to the first drasha that the Gemara brought, the lashon of the pasuk where it says, Ervas imcha loy segale, and then it says, imcha hi, that's the miyut, that's saying that you only chayev for the mother, and not for Eishes Av. That's where Rave is going to learn it out from. But what was the Gemara's question before on this? The Gemara's question before was, if you're learning out from the words imcha hi, how about in the next pasuk? Over there it talks about ervas eishes avicha, and there it says avicha hi. Why would I not say that mir as well? That you should not be chayiv for imcha. You should only be chayiv for eishes av. That's what the Gemara before said. There's a problem with this rasha. So Rava will explain why it's not a problem. Kasav Rabbi Yehuda holds that if you look in the two psukim here, you'll see that there's a difference. Really, to understand what the Gemara is saying here, you have to see the psukim. Over here in this Gemara, they have the psukim on the side, an ois beis and an ois gimel. So an ois beis, if you look in the pasuk, it says ervas avicha. First, it talks about ervas avicha. Now, who is ervas avicha? The Gemara will explain. Ervas avicha is Eishes Av, the father's wife. Then it says ervas imcha, which is the mother, leisagala, and then it adds imcha hi. Okay, so now how we are going to understand this pasuk? So now let's see in the Galashon of the Gemara. Ervas avicha, when it says in the beginning ervas avicha, zu eishes avicha, it doesn't refer to the father. It refers to the father's wife. Now, Maisel b'gzeira shava. The Gemara on the next daf says that how do we know it's the father's wife? There's a gzeira shava for this. Now, when you read the beginning of the pasuk, when it says ervas avicha, the father's wife, what does that mean? In what case, the father's wife? Mashma, that would include bein eishes aviv she'imai, bein eishes aviv she'eini imai. Whether it's actually your mother as well or not your mother, it doesn't make any difference. Either way, you would be chayav for the fact that it's your father's wife. That's what you see in the first half of the pasuk. And then, when it says, in the continuation of the pasuk, imai she'eina eishes aviv minayin, how do you know if it's your mother and it's not your father's wife anymore? So how do you know that you're going to be chayav for this as well? That's a continuation of the pasuk. Talmud loyma ervas imcha. The pasuk after this says that you're chayav for ervas imcha as well. Leisegale. Now the pasuk continues and says imcha hi. Why does it say again imcha hi, that this is your mother? Here it's coming to clarify the beginning of the pasuk. When it said in the beginning of the pasuk, ervas avicha, which refers to eishes aviv, don't think that means that you're going to be chayav for eishes aviv, whether it's your mother, whether it's not your mother. Comes the end of the pasuk to clarify that you're only going to be chayav for the fact that it's your mother and not for the fact that it's your father's wife if you have both together. That's what you learn out from here. So it's dafke. So the point that Rav is saying is, it's dafke in this pasuk because it mentioned both in this pasuk together. It starts off with Eishes Av, and then it talks about the mother, Imcha. So when it later says in the pasuk Imcha Hi, it makes sense to say that the drasha of Imcha Hi is coming to clarify what it mentioned in this pasuk regarding Eishes Av. That if it's Eishes Av, you're only going to be chayav for Eishes Av if it's not your mother. But if it is your mother, you're not going to be chayav for Eishes Av. That's in this pasuk. But in the other pasuk, which the Gemara asked before from, where it says ervas eishes avicha loisegala, and then it says ervas avicha hu, there's a drasha there. But that drasha is not coming to exclude that you're going to be chayav for your mother, because in that pasuk the mother is not mentioned at all. There's no reason to say a drasha in relation to the mother. It's not mentioned in that pasuk. It's only in this pasuk where it mentions both Eishes Av and Imcha that I say that Imcha Hi is coming to exclude from Eishes Av. But in the other pasuk where it says Ervas Avichi, I don't darshan that. So therefore, there's no contradiction here between these two drashas. And the Gemara will also explain later on Daf Nun Dalid that when it says over here Ervas Avicha, according to the Rabbanon, Avicha actually does not mean Eishes Av. Avicha means when a person has a relation with his father himself. And therefore, the drasha, the way Rabbi Yehuda darshans it, does not apply according to the Rabbanan. There's a lot more in this Rashi's. Look over here, the big Rashi's over here. There's a big Arichas in Rashi, but Rashi talks about what it says in Daf Nun Daled. We'll see in Mr. Shem when we learn Daf Nun Daled.